Good day. I'd like to welcome you to this presentation of Plymouth Profiles. This show is an opportunity to meet with people from the greater Plymouth area, and today we're delighted to have as our guest former Plymouth Town Manager and now newly elected State Representative Mark Sylvia. Mark, welcome.
Pleasure to be here, Steve.
So, Mark, it's been a while since you've been here.
Yeah.
So, where have you been? And for those people who don't maybe know, let's start with your background. Tell us about, where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school?
Sure. I grew up in Fairhaven, so Bristol County, about 45 minutes from here. Went through the Fairhaven Public Schools. Went off to college in D.C. at American University. I got my bachelor's there and my master's in public administration. And then my first job out of grad school was right here in Plymouth as what was called the special assistant to the town manager. Don Jacobs was the town manager at the time, so I did a bunch of special projects work. And then from there, had the opportunity to move up to be the assistant town manager under former town manager Eleanor Beth. And then was acting when she left. Then Pam Nolan came on board as the town manager, and I was assistant town manager under Pam. When Pam left, I was acting again, and then permanent for almost 5 years until I left in 2009 to join the Patrick administration.
So what years were you our town manager in Plymouth?
So it would have been from 04, 05 to 2009.
And when you were serving here in Plymouth as a special assistant all the way up to town manager, what are some of your most vivid recollections about Plymouth town government?
Wow. I mean, a lot that I have carried with me, whether it was on the school committee or town moderator in Fairhaven, or my time as the head of the Green Communities Division in state government, or even now as a rep, I carried a lot of my experience from Plymouth because I was here for almost 11 years in different roles. I really have been and continue to be very impressed with how government works here in Plymouth. It was and I assume continues to be, a high growth community. And so we were able to do a lot, and I was able to be exposed to a lot of things that a lot of communities aren't because of the growth. So whether it was the development of the Pine Hills, or the building of new fire stations, or the debt exclusion vote to rebuild Plymouth North and Plymouth South and build the senior center, or it was Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station and our ability to have negotiated the largest pilot agreement, payment in lieu of tax agreement. That was all really amazing experience to be part of. And it was the government and the engagement of the people that were involved that enabled us to be successful. So whether it was town meeting, and I will give you props that you run a really good town meeting. A lot of good things came out of that, a good debate. Town meeting members are fully engaged and take it very seriously. So there's a lot. In the select board, I had a very good working relationship with the select board through the years and the work that they did and the other committees that have been involved. So I look back very fondly. I think a lot of what I've been able to do since I left Plymouth is really in part because of what I learned in Plymouth and observed. So the community should be very proud of that.
And you kind of mentioned that when you left here, you did serve now as moderator in your community.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So probably in part because I saw, maybe contrary to popular belief, I think you have a lot of fun with what you do as the town moderator. And in interacting with you, it was something that I was impressed with how you did it. And the opportunity came up in Fairhaven. I'd been a town meeting member. Our moderator decided not to run again. The new moderator got elected to the select board. So now there was an opening. So I decided I would try my hand at being town moderator. And I've been moderator for 15 years. I'm in my, I guess it's sixth term, is 3-year terms. And I've really enjoyed it and learned a lot along the way. And there's a lot that you can do to help bring the community to consensus on really big issues. So I've enjoyed doing that. That actually has helped me both in my personal life and in my professional life, because you have to manage different points of view and personalities. So, but that's been a wonderful experience.
So when you left Plymouth, you went and worked at the state level?
Yes. So
tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. In 2009 or 2008, Governor Patrick came to Plymouth, was quite impressed with him and his vision and his focus. And the opportunity presented itself to this new program started called the Green Communities Division, which was to help cities and towns in reducing energy costs. And so they were looking for someone that had a municipal background. And so my first foray into state government and state service was as the first director of that program. Got to work with amazing people and work with town managers and select boards and moderators from across the Commonwealth. And it's been great to see how many communities, including Plymouth. Is Plymouth a green community? I don't know. But Fairhaven, New Bedford, the communities surrounding me. And
we're green in the sense we have the paper bags.
Yes, yeah. But it's been nice to see. I think we started with there may be 14 green communities, and more than 2/3 of the state's cities and towns are designated green communities. And it's the kind of program where it's not directive. It's not the state coming in and telling you what to do. It's an optional program where communities, if they meet certain criteria, they get this designation and there's funding that goes with it. So it's been a great model, and the state might want to consider that as a delivery method for other things that can really benefit communities. So I did that, and then at the beginning of the new term, governor ran for re-election. There was some shifting of people and positions, and the position of Commissioner of Energy Resources, which the Green Communities Director reported to, opened up, and they offered me the job. So I was commissioner for, I think, 3+ years. And then in the final 6 months of the administration, they asked me to be the energy undersecretary. So I got to deal with regional energy issues, meaning the other 5 New England states and the Eastern Canadian provinces, because we're all part of that same energy grid and network. So it was pretty amazing to get involved and engaged in those issues. And then at the end of the Patrick administration, I decided I probably should have some private sector experience. My entire career has been in the public sector at the local and state level. And so I spent the last 10 years in the private sector for a large-scale solar and battery storage development company. So, and then my long-term state representative, Bill Strauss, who was chair of transportation, who had served 32 years in the legislature in the 10th Bristol district, announced he was retiring. And it's something I've always wanted to do. I love where I'm from. It's where my parents and my grandparents grew up. And I wanted to have the opportunity to give back and, serve the people of my community. And so ran, and, it wasn't an easy walk in. I didn't have a primary opponent, but in the general I did. And so we did knocked on close to 8,000 doors and really get to meet a lot of people and talk about what was most important to them and what I would do if they gave me the chance. And so I've got the chance. So got sworn in as state representative for the 10th Bristol district.
And what towns are in the 10th Bristol?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a misnomer because it's Bristol and Plymouth County communities. So I have all of the town of Fairhaven, which is my hometown, all of Mattapoisett, Marion, and Rochester, which is the southwesternmost communities in Plymouth County. Right. And then a portion of the town of Acushnet and a portion of Ward 1 in the city of New Bedford. So the district is pretty diverse in terms of rural communities, suburban communities, and then the large gateway city of New Bedford. So it's quite a diverse community in a lot of different ways, from socioeconomics to industry to geography. Some are inland communities, some are coastal communities, and I love that diversity.
And having Miriam, Mattapoisett, and Rochester, you're pretty close geographically to us.
Yes.
In terms of our legislative delegation.
Without a doubt. It's both, it's Wareham is what separates my district from Plymouth, really. So it's just one town that separates us. But I'm honored to be able to work. There are 19 of us in the freshman class. And so interestingly enough, for Bristol and Plymouth counties, a lot of the freshmen are from our area. You have Steve Willett, who replaced Paul Schmidt. He's Fall River, Westport. There's me, who replaced Bill Strauss. There's John Gasky, who replaced Susan Gifford in Wareham and Carver. Michelle Badger, who replaced Matt Muratori in Plymouth. And then Ken Sweezy, who replaced Josh Cutler. So there are a number of freshman reps that actually make up a big part of the Bristol and Plymouth counties. And then there are a few on the Cape. Tom Moakley, who replaced Dylan Fernandes, who's now the senator that represents Plymouth, and Hadley Luddy, who replaced Sarah Peake. So just between Cape Islands, I guess you could say the 9th congressional district, when you look at it, there are quite a few of us that are new reps. And we're all in the bullpen right now, which is how it works. When you first get elected, you don't have offices until rules are set, which we're going to be voting on next week. And then you get your committee assignments, and then you get your offices after that. And the bullpen is great because we get to know each other a little bit better and work with each other regardless of party.
So some people watching might say, well, okay, Mark was the Plymouth town manager once upon a time, but now he is a state rep for another community. So I guess I'd like to hear from you. How do you see yourself working with our legislative delegation?
Yep.
And how do you see yourself in terms of representing not just your district, but the interests of the state or this part of the state?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. So a couple of ways that I'll answer that. The first is, and I may have said this back when I was first appointed town manager in Plymouth. I have a deep love for the community that I grew up in Fairhaven and Greater New Bedford, but I also love Plymouth because I've grown up professionally. My first 3 jobs in my career were in Plymouth. And 11 years anywhere is quite a bit of time to get familiar with the community.
Particularly when you're younger professionally.
Yes, younger professionally. But a lot of the skills that I learned and honed were here in Plymouth. I had great mentors like Ellie and Ken Tavares and other members of the select board and other professionals within our government who I consider, then and still do colleagues. So I know a lot about the Plymouth community, and so I think I can be an effective support for the legislative delegation in Plymouth, Kathy Lenatra, Michelle Badger, and Dylan Fernandes, as someone who understands, if they raise issues relative to Plymouth that we need to take action on in the legislature.
You have the history.
I have the history and the knowledge and a sense of what those priorities are and why. So that's one way that I certainly can be helpful to Plymouth is just my experience and coming from and growing up here professionally. I also think, my primary responsibility is to the 10th Bristol district. That's my district. Those are the 45,000 people that elected me, or not the 45,000, but it's 45,000 each district. But it's the voters in the 10th Bristol district that voted for me. And so my primary focus and advocacy is for the people of the 10th Bristol district. But legislators aren't just in the legislature to be completely hyper-focused on just their community, because what happens in Plymouth can have an impact on Fairhaven, for example, or what happens in Plymouth County can have an effect on Bristol County. And so it's very important that in order to be a good representative for your community, you also have to take the broader view of the Commonwealth. And there are things that we will vote on that affect the entire Commonwealth. And so obviously that's another way that, I will be very aware of, because, for example, Plymouth is a coastal community. The majority of the 10th Bristol district is coastal. And so there are a lot of issues in common that we have collectively as a portion of the state. And so being able to advocate for each other, Michelle and Kathy and myself and the other members of the Greater New Bedford delegation and the others that I mentioned that are new reps, it'll be important on those issues, those regional issues, that we're working together and understand the implications of what happened. So those are the ways that I'll, certainly view my role as a state rep and how that affects Plymouth.
As a state rep, do you have any particular issues that are near and dear to you?
Yeah. So, broadly speaking, cost of living issues are front and center for everyone. So I think for many of us, a big driver for us, particularly in this session, this 2-year session, is to help our constituents with bringing down the costs of living. So that's everything from healthcare costs to housing costs to utility costs, utility bills. So that's a priority for me, and I know a priority for a lot of other people.
When you knocked on doors, what was the number one issue that people raised?
Yeah, so cost of living. And the other issue, which was interesting, was people were tired of the vitriol. They were tired of, the division in politics. And unfortunately, that hasn't stopped. And there will inevitably be things that we as the Massachusetts legislature are likely to have to deal with that come down from actions that are being taken at the federal level, whether they're executive orders that we don't quite know yet what the implications are for the Commonwealth. But that doesn't mean that we can't show and lead by example in the Massachusetts legislature. I mean, I'm proud to be able to co-sponsor certain bills with members of the Republican caucus and try and find ways that, there are things that we can solve together. We don't need to be so hyper-partisan. And that's a message that I heard when I was knocking on doors. I think more parochially, things like the fishing industry, which is a very big part of my district, aquaculture, cranberries. So on the industry side of things, those are issues that I'm passionate.
We think of tourism. What about tourism for you?
Yep, tourism as well. I mean, it is for Greater New Bedford. There's kind of the historic tourism, but because we're coastal, just like Plymouth, there's just kind of general tourism. Tourism is a big industry. It generates a lot of revenue locally for Greater New Bedford. So tourism is absolutely something that is important for our area. I also think because I was a town manager and because I've been in local government, issues around the state budget, state aid, trying to find ways to provide funding for building projects. So, for example, MSBA is a great structure for school buildings, but there is not a building authority for public buildings or public safety facilities. So communities are fitting the bill for the full costs related to new police stations, fire stations, or town halls. There's a bill that was filed that I think makes a lot of sense, which would create a public building authority with a dedicated funding source, just like MSBA. MSBA, I think it's 1 penny on the sales tax. And what's been proposed, and, with legislation, there are over 6,000 bills that were filed this session. And so once committees are assigned and we understand what the priorities are, but there's a dedicated funding source for a bill that would create this building authority. So I think using my background and understanding on municipal issues to help relieve pressure that cities and towns are facing, because as we know, everybody's levying not everybody, but most communities are levying the full 2.5, and there's nowhere else to go. And a lot of overrides have failed because people in the community don't want to see their property taxes go up. So what can we do to help cities and towns moving forward is something that I think is important that I'll be focused on as well.
So you mentioned knocking on doors and hearing the issue of the vitriol among certain people, and it hasn't changed in some ways. How can you, as a state representative, be helpful to people who are not only upset but affected by some of the decisions that are coming down rapid fire at the national level? I mean, we're taping this in the end of February, and yesterday, for a brief time, the JFK Library was closed, something that we all have enjoyed over the years during school vacation week, when people take their families to something like that. If a constituent calls you and says, I'm concerned about, the fact that they're laying off all of these people and it's affecting my family, do you have a relationship with our congressional delegation that would then be helpful to a local constituent?
Yes, I appreciate you mentioning that. As a matter of fact, last week, Senator Markey invited the new freshman representatives to a meeting to discuss those very issues, to just give us a sense of what his office is doing. And of course, Jim Cantwell, who's a former rep from Marshfield.
We know Jim well.
Who really understands this area. And as a former rep, I think that's really helpful to ensure that we have a good relationship. So Senator Markey and we all had conversations about, what to expect right now, and encouraging us. We all got to meet his staffers that have whatever district or region of the state we represent. So we were able to meet that point person so that we can share information that then we can communicate back to some of those constituents, or where we can direct our constituents to have further discussions. So I think that's a key. We need to listen, even if it's a federal issue and not a state issue, because inevitably it may become a state issue depending on what it is. But
They are. A number of these federal issues are becoming state issues.
Yes, you're seeing that. Yes, you're absolutely right. And, as we go into the FY26 budget, again, there are some questions about federal aid and whether or not that will be, because Congress right now is trying to figure out what they're going to do from a budget resolution perspective. But I am also hopeful there seems to be some pushback from red states and blue states about the implications of critical programs. I mean, I think we'll all agree that wherever we can be more efficient, wherever we can reduce costs or eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse, we should. But to just wholesale do this without any clear pathway not only scares people, but also brings to question whether or not people are going to get the things that they depend on most. And that's the part that's really concerning for us and that we're hearing from constituents on. So part of it's just being available to your constituent to share their fears and helping to triage it. Well, let's talk to Senator Markey's office or Representative Keating's office, or here's what the implications are for the state and here's what we're intending to do. The attorneys general of many states are now litigating some of this as well, so we still don't know what's going to happen. So it's not a great place for us to be, and more and more people are getting scared. And so, to the extent that we can be a forum to listen to them and help them navigate through what's happening, I think that's important. And it's going to be more and more of an important role for us to play at the legislature.
Mark, do you have any bills that you've thought about possibly submitting?
Yes. So January 17th was the deadline. So you get sworn in, and then there's a period of time to file bills. You can late file bills later. And home rule petitions, which you're very familiar with, you can file those throughout the year. So there's no deadline for that. So I thought about, there are a few ways that I looked at it. One is the rep that was before me looking at bills that he may have filed that maybe didn't make it through to the end of the session. Are there any of those that, I could refile that will be helpful for our district? And there were a few of those related to the cranberry industry, for example. And then there are others that I filed that either I felt particularly passionately about and that I knew enough about that could possibly move through this session. So there's one, when I was in Plymouth, there was the senior tax work-off program where seniors could, it's $1,500 or $2,000 now. There's a similar program for veterans, but it's capped at a number lower than the senior. So seniors, it's capped at $2,000. Veterans, it's lower than that. So I filed a bill to increase it to the same amount, $2,000. And then there are others. Dangerous dog bill I filed that a constituent of mine now, who was a constituent in a different rep's district, had filed last session. She's a veterinarian. So the MSPCA and the animal control officers support these changes to the dangerous dog statute. I have some familiarity because as assistant town manager in Plymouth, I was the dog judge. So some of those bills were either filed on behalf of constituents or bills that I thought were bills that could pass this session or are refiles. And then as we've been counseled by many members of the legislature, past and present, when I've asked advice, we're going to get to vote on a lot of major issues that impact people. So housing, education, healthcare. There is a lot that's going to obviously go through the process this session. And so you don't necessarily have to file legislation to be an active participant, and you can co-sponsor legislation. So right now we're in that process of looking at which bills we want to co-sponsor, and advocates are asking us to co-sponsor bills. So I've done some of that as well.
I would share with you that during the campaign last year, most of the candidates on both sides of the aisle shared the fact that the number one issue they were hearing was affordable housing.
Yes.
That really was something that was very important to people in our area. Mark, when you're not serving as a state rep or your town moderator, what do you like to do in your spare time for fun?
Well, I have a daughter who's 18 who's going to be graduating from high school and a son who's graduating from college who's going to be 21. So I love spending as much time as I can with them because at some point it's empty nest and they're off on their own adventures. I love to play pickleball. Fairhaven's got a disproportionate number of outdoor and indoor pickleball courts, so that's very convenient, although lately I haven't been able to. I like to run, spend time with friends, so I'm trying to do as much of that as I can because it's important to balance the two.
So, Mark, if people joined us partway through and they didn't hear the entire presentation, what's one thing that you'd like them to take away from this?
Well, especially for viewers in the greater Plymouth area, I think the most important thing that I would say is, as someone who had the opportunity and the honor to work in Plymouth and serve the people of Plymouth, this is a great community. This is a special place. And there's so much that has been accomplished here that other communities are emulating. And so for me, as someone who worked and had the opportunity to work here, I'm just really grateful, and people should really be proud of this community and what collectively you all have been able to accomplish.
Mark, thank you. If somebody wants to reach out to you, how would they do that?
Yeah, there are a couple of ways. You can email me directly at mark.sylvia, Sylvia, at mahouse.gov. That's my official state rep email address. You can also go to my state rep website. There's a lot of good information at staterepmarksylvia.com. And there's a lot of good information. You can reach out to me that way as well. So
good. Mark,
hey,
Sylvia,
Steve,
thank you.
This is my pleasure.
Former Plymouth past town manager and also newly elected state representative and a fellow town moderator.
Yes. Yeah, we'll do the secret handshake at the end of this.
That's right. Thank you,
Steve. Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us. But please stay tuned. We have another guest who will be with us momentarily. I'm Steve Triffletti, and this is Plymouth Profiles. Please stay tuned. I'd like to welcome you back to this presentation of Plymouth Profiles. And for the second half of the segment, we're delighted to introduce two guests. I'm going to begin with longtime Plymouth resident involved in the town of Plymouth, Jennifer Harris. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you, Steve.
Jennifer, for those people that may not have known you, tell us a little bit about your background. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school?
Well, thank you. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm from the east side of Cleveland, and I went to Kent State University, and then I moved out west when I graduated. Ended up back in Boston through life's interesting paths, and I started working at the Somerville Public Library back in 1987, and I went to Simmons College and got my master's degree in library science, and that's what opened the doors for me to become an assistant library director. And that's how I was looking for a job, and people kept saying to me, there's a brand new library in Plymouth. It was 1993, because it had already opened in 1991. And it was before Google. I had no idea where I was going. I'm not from around here. And I pulled into the parking lot at the Plymouth Public Library, and I thought I had reached nirvana. There was a parking lot with 100 spaces. I'd been in Somerville where there were no spaces. And I just wanted that job so much and ended up as the head of circulation. Then I was promoted to assistant director, where I was the assistant director for about 22 and a half years. And then I was fortunate enough to be appointed the library director for the last 5 years of my career. And I'm retired now.
Yes, and that's how we met, in my capacity as moderator and you at the library.
Yes.
And so tell us now about what your newest venture is.
Well, I knew that when I retired that I had to have things to do. I'm not one that can sit around, although I can, but I know I shouldn't.
And you are a town meeting member.
So that was the first thing that I put in place. I moved to Sawyer's Reach, which is a wonderful development over in West Plymouth. Very, very happy. And I became a town meeting member of Precinct 13. I had always been involved with legislative work for libraries, supporting library budgets. So I was very well connected with Kathy Lenatra, Matt Muratori, and Susan Moran at the time was the senator. So then I did that, became a town meeting member. And while I was the library director, in 2020, we worked on a program called the Plymouth Poet Laureate. Stephen Cole from Plymouth Development Foundation came to me and said, what do you think about creating a Plymouth Poet Laureate? And he and I just had the best time talking about it, and we started to work on it. We held a wonderful, we don't really call it a competition, at the Plymouth Public Library on February 2020, the very end. Miriam was participated. We had over 100 people showed up, filled that Otto Phalo meeting room with people who love poetry, and we came up with our first poet laureate, which was Stephen Delbos. And then during COVID, he was really on his own, and I was, we were not connected. And then I retired and ran into Stephen Cole again and said, what's going on? And so we brought together a group of people who are interested in culture and arts and local economy. And that was the basis for the idea of the Plymouth Poet Laureate, was to be able to support local artists as well as bring this to our community. So we created a nonprofit organization called America's Hometown Laureates. And of course, I'm the only one retired on the board, so I'm the president. But additionally, I'm also on the board of the local scene, which is here. I am a trustee for the Pilgrim Society and Pilgrim Hall Museum. I'm on a committee at Town Hall that preserves the art and history collections. And I'm a member of at least 2 book clubs. And there you go.
Jennifer, let's move now to our main guest today.
Yes.
Would you introduce her?
Oh, of course. Hello, Miriam. Hello, Jennifer. So Miriam O'Neill is our current Plymouth Poet Laureate. She was appointed in, it was April of 2024, so that was a year. It's a 2-year run. Miriam and I go way back. She had been my poet laureate at the library when I was working on Poetry Adventures. She was always a person that I could come to and talk to. So we seem to have a shared love of poetry. Her knowledge is amazing. She bowls me over every time that we sit down and talk. And so at this point, I'd like to introduce you to Miriam O'Neill.
Miriam, welcome. Thank you, sir, for the profiles. Welcome. And Miriam, tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay, well, I feel like a shirker compared to our friend Jennifer. But my background, my connection to Plymouth goes all the way to childhood, almost to infancy. My family moved here when I was just over a year old. And I'm not going to say when, but I've been in Manomet. I grew up in Manomet and then did move away early in my adulthood and moved right back. So I've lived here in Plymouth for the last 40 years. And all that time I've been writing. I was a professor of, an adjunct professor of writing and poetry at University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, for 17 years. And I have, in the last 7 years, produced 3 books of poems. It just, all of a sudden, late bloomers, it's okay. You can wait. It will happen. Just keep going. So I was fortunate enough to apply for the Plymouth Poet Laureate position, really based on the fact that I'd already been doing a lot of work with poetry in Plymouth. I host the longest-running poetry reading series on south of Boston, which is called Poetry, the Art of Words. And our home is Plymouth Center for the Arts on North Street. And who could ask for a more beautiful home? It's just, you couldn't. It's just gorgeous there. And we host readings from September through June and feature poets, award-winning poets from all over the region every month. It's a wonderful experience. And through that, I've met many, many poets. I've developed a community of poets from Boston all the way down along Cape Cod and out to Mansfield in that area. So it's been a wonderful experience.
So what does it mean for people watching to be a poet laureate?
Well, I feel like my mission, if you will, is to be an ambassador for poetry in the greater Plymouth area. And by that I mean I want to encourage people to come to poetry, to find something of their own in poetry, and to understand that it's not just an academic exercise in school, that there is a richness to language and especially a richness in poetry that will feed the soul.
And you brought some readings, so tell us a little bit about what you're going to read, and these are the readings.
Great. Well, I have 3 books here. As I said, I suddenly found myself with 3 books in 6 years. The first was this book called We Start With What We're Given, and that came out in 2018. And then that was followed in 2020 by this beautiful book. I mean, the cover is beautiful. The Body Dialogues. And this book is especially important to me because it was published by a small press out of Hanson, Massachusetts, that is making big noise in the literary press world. Lily Poetry Review Books is just an astonishingly wonderful publisher of books. And then, not to be outdone, I was fortunate enough to have a manuscript accepted by Nix's Mate, which is a Boston area publisher. And this book, The Half Said Things, was published in 2022. So I've been busy.
Good. Well, please read something from them.
Okay, I'd like to read just a few poems from these 2 books and one from the early book, We Start With What We're Given. And I'll read because of chronologically, it just helps to start here. And this poem I'm reading especially because here we are in Plymouth at the local scene. And this poem recounts an experience I had at Brewers Marina, the old Brewers Marina.
Sure.
Which people of a certain age will remember was pretty wide open in the winter. And it refers to Rilke, Rainer Maria Rilke, who was a German poet, and I was translating his work at the time. Translating Rilke in winter. At Brewers Marina, I prowl in open sheds under keels and hulls scraped clean of barnacles and mussel beard. Each bilge hole hums like an empty moon shell. Last night, in Einsamkeit, I found the word Zwitterstunden, which Snow resolves as the hours in between, but which I call the hermaphroditic hours. Because what's more likely in a poem about loneliness that meditates on what it means to wake up in the wrong bed? If I had not been to sea, I would not understand these boats in cradles. If I had not wanted in the night, I would not know this heart braced in its call of ribs.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I've been there among all those boats in the winter.
All those boats in the winter, right. So I have 2 poems from the Body Dialogues, and
And how did you
wrote
come
it
up
down.
with the title?
The Body Dialogues, the title became from the idea that many of these poems in this particular book reflect on the idea that the body has its own language that is separate from the intellectual, from the mind. That if you listen to your body as a child, if you listen to your heart, that you find your way. So I would like to read 2 poems from this book. The first one I'm reading especially from my friend Jennifer Harris, former library director, and in honor of Manomet Public Library. This is called Book Night for Patrick. In the Manomet branch of the Plymouth Public Library, Mrs. Carkland stamps books and cards. Each date shines on its yellow legend. The open spines make boats and roof lines, a seaside village of fiction and natural history, poetry that mounts as dates dry inside. The cards she's pinched from each slot stack up as she teeters the stamp first on its ink pad and then on the line, the pencils in their holder, the telephone in its perch, jump as she dates each book's for its return. We're taking home a collision of sensibilities, the case of the black orchid, the book of snakes, the fairy queen, and for you, again, White Fang, the story of the wolf dog born into violence, who kills a man to save his master. Each time you read the story, you're saved too. Dad comes back from buying beer, approves each book, and pays the penny fines. Piled in the station wagon, we ride home, in and out of yellow pools of light, our own street black as a page at night. This is the place we'll run from, the place we'll never stop referring to as home. But tonight, all we know is the sound of snow chafing cedars, that we have dreams we never tell, and that in spite of some who beat him bloody, the brave wolf dog will learn to love the man. So.
When we first met recently, one of the things I talked about with you and Jennifer was children and poetry. And what are you doing, if anything, to reach out to young people?
Well, I've just begun that part of my poet laureate journey. Jennifer and I had the opportunity to attend both Plymouth North and Plymouth South's events for their final Poetry Out Loud competitions, which were amazing. And then last week, we attended the reception for the opening reception for Plymouth's school department's Reflections magazine, their 10th anniversary, their 10th issue. And we got to see a lot of the artwork that students responded to. We got to hear a selection of poets. And I have to tell you, some of the 9-year-old poets were the most amazing reciters of their work. It was a lot of fun. And I look forward to, over the next year and a half that we have left in my term, beginning the process of finding a youth poet laureate for Plymouth, someone to bring the young people in the town together around poetry. So,
may I add something?
Yes, Jennifer.
Sure. Additionally, we're looking to introduce to the students, and they're from K through 12, that there's poetry outside of the school. We know how busy they are. We know they're playing sports. They have all sorts of obligations. But with Miriam's Poetry, the Art of Words, on a Sunday, they might be able to convince a parent to bring them to listen and even read one of their own poems. That's one of our things, is there's poetry outside of the school.
Right.
Very exciting.
And to start at a young age, I mean, I think I told you some of my fondest memories were going to the local library in Kingston and then Plymouth with my mother, who would bring me there often, because in order to have books, we had to go to the library and get them. We couldn't afford them.
That's right.
Kingston.
And one of my favorite books was Best Loved Poems, and there were quite a few from the Transcendentalists.
That's right. And mentioning Kingston Library, I'd love to give a plug for a program that's coming up that I designed with Stephen Miller, who's the reference librarian there. In the last few years, the Kingston Library has had a poetry competition that has entries in 3 different age groups, from elementary school all the way through adult. And this year we're doing something a little different. It's called Read a Poem, Write a Poem, Share a Poem. And it is encouraging people in the greater Kingston area and all the OCLN library system to go to their local library, go to the stacks, the poetry section, of course, browse, pick up a few different books, read a few poems. Don't feel like you have to read the whole book. And then find a poem that you love or that really irritates the heck out of you, and write a response poem to it. Then those will all be submitted to the Kingston Public Library through their website, the entries, and then we'll choose 10 poets of varying ages and background, varying kinds of responses, if you will, to come and present their poems, share their poems at a reading at Kingston Library in April, during April National Poetry Month. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Sure.
And it will, as I said, it is open to the greater Kingston area. So, and last year when we had the last 2 years when we had competition, we had poets from Kingston, Marshfield, Duxbury, Plymouth. I think that was the majority.
And local scene services some of those towns.
Yes.
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 Tell us your last reading.
Okay. I'll read from The Half Said Things, and it's a short poem. The Half Said Things, I will read the epigraph for the Half Said, the whole book, because it's sort of, you had asked about titles.
Yes.
Like how, and this title comes from a quote from Colm Tobin, who is an Irish writer. And he said in an interview, "I miss the sky, the weather, the landscape, the soft look, the half-said thing. Where I'm from, the people will say very little, and you'll have to find out what happened if you want to know." So in this book, I would like to read a short poem, and this again comes from, it has a Manomet connection because a neighbor bought one of my books, and she bought this first book, and she started taking it to the nursing home when her mother was there and not really aware of much going on. It's called Kinds of Fire. She brings my book to the nursing home and reads poems to her mother, who has no memories of her own. "It's nice," she says. "They're short. And my mother doesn't have to say anything. Just listen." It seems to make her feel good, hearing the words. And I imagine brain cells aflame, synapses charging like some neuronal Pleiades. Her daughter's voice a struck match as she reads the line about blue swans who stir our voices in the black mud with sunset-colored feet.
Nice. Very nice.
Thank you.
And how did you happen to pick that selection?
I think part of it was I wanted to have some poems that are Plymouth related. A lot of my poems rise out of my life here.
Sure.
And I have such good memories of my childhood down on Manomet Beach and out in the woods. And so there you have it, Plymouth in poems.
And Miriam, if people watching would want to contact you, how would they do that?
Sure, you can go to, it's all one word, Poetry, the Art of Words, 6, the number 6, @gmail.com. Or you can contact America's Hometown Laureate's
Facebook page,
Instagram, and Instagram or Facebook. And then you can also check out the Plymouth Poetry Forum on Facebook as well. Lots of ways to get in touch.
And tell us what you like to do in your spare time when you're not being Poet Laureate.
I write other things. I'm working on a biography at the moment of an artist who was from Britain but lived in Ireland for all of her adult life on the Aran Islands. And she had a remarkable life, and nobody has written a full biography of her, so I've decided to do it.
Good.
So it's just more words.
What words?
I do have one shout out.
Go ahead.
So we have U.S. Poet Laureate Robert Pinsky
Yes.
will be coming to the Spire on Sunday, March 30th. Tickets will be free. They'll be going live in the next couple of weeks at the Spire and promoted that way. So that's America's Hometown Laureates is bringing him, and he does something called Poem Jazz. And he has a quintet, a jazz quintet. So he does his poetry, which I have to admit sometimes goes, can go over my head pretty easily, and then pairs it with jazz music. So it should be very exciting.
It's kind of a call and response between the musicians and the poet. It's a really wonderful thing. Yeah. And they just recently played at the Regatta Bar, but you can come to the Spire and see them with us for free.
I think that's one of the nice things about your poetry, Miriam, is it doesn't really go over our head. I mean, it's right there.
No. Some of it, she's done great. She's done beautifully.
Jennifer, what do you like to do in your free time?
In my free time, well,
free time?
The truth is I like to read mystery books and legal thrillers. But I'm in these book clubs that require me to read other things. One is classics, which I love. I love reading classics. And the other one is a more free form. So I've read some great books as a result of that, things that I might not have picked. But in truth, I'd like to just watch, or British mysteries. You know, Sherlock Holmes is my most favorite in the world. But I have family that's spread around the country. I have 3 baby grandnieces and 2 nephews and a sister and a brother. And so a lot of my vacation time would be spent with the family. And to be honest with you, the swimming pool at Sawyer's Reach is my favorite summer spot.
Pool Laureate.
That's right. I'm called the Pool Laureate as a poet laureate. But thank you for asking.
And, you know, when you mention these things, it brings back when I was at Silver Lake Junior High School, I had a English teacher, Patricia Goldman, and she would read to us in 7th and 8th grade, and she would read Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
She loved it. But
Yeah.
it was so nice to be just in a class and have a teacher just read to you. You know, it's not something that I would have necessarily expected, but it still stays with me.
Yeah, I believe reading out loud, recitation, which is what one of the forms, the Poetry Out Loud program in the schools, that's where the students select from already established poetry. They learn the words and how to enact it in public. They get up and they perform it in front of an audience. So it takes the mind, the mouth, the words, all connected to come out. And I think that's a completely different activity than maybe sitting there watching or reading a book, including speaking as well as handwriting. It's all how the brain works.
Pinsky has said that poetry is one of the most physical of the arts for that reason, because it takes your lungs, your heart, your mind, it takes everything to deliver a poem.
And there's more to it than just reading. I mean, those of us that are public speakers, we know that. And I mean, I can remember as a child even memorizing things like the Gettysburg Address or things like that. And you don't just race through it. You have to think about what you're saying.
And not be too afraid. It's a way of learning, and also socializing. Some of the young students we saw, it was precious. It was precious to see how they put themselves out there, how they dressed for the occasion. You know, us oldies, they don't even wear coats anymore in the cold weather, and there they are. I don't understand it, but they
shorts in the cold weather.
It's just like amazing. So so that's all good stuff. I don't know how we are on time, but 2 minutes.
We're going to finish up.
Okay.
I'd like you to give, if there's one takeaway for people that might not have joined right at the beginning, what would you like that to be, Jennifer?
Okay, so my takeaway is to keep your eye out for America's Hometown Laureates. Our activities are to promote poetry events throughout the town. We have them in several different venues. We have open mics, and we encourage anyone who's interested to check us out. And we have an open ear for poetry.
Mm-hmm. And Plymouth Poet Laureate, Miriam O'Neill, what would be your takeaway?
Read and share. Tell somebody about a poem you love and share it with them.
Thank you, Miriam O'Neill.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you. Thank you,
Being with me again.
Thank you very much.
This completes this presentation of Plymouth Profiles. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. Please be with us for future presentations. I'm Steve Triffletti. Good day.